No spoilers here, I promise, but I will give my opinion on this book, spoken right now in one word of monotonous tone to not foreshadow judgment. Wow. Now, that could be a wow, this book was terrible, or wow, this book was amazing. I am Koa, and this is Casual Outdoors Weekly, and last week I realized that I have not read a novel in a very long time, like a couple of years. I've become entirely dependent on Netflix to satisfy my fictional storyline entertainment. And I kind of feel a bit guilty about that, because it seems a bit lazy. But I do read a lot of books. But it's mostly books on current events, science, history, and the history of science. For this week's Casual Outdoors Weekly, I chose to read a book outdoors, and I chose a novel by John Green called Looking for Alaska. And if you don't know who John Green is, then you need look no farther than where you are right now, because besides being an author, he is also a famous YouTuber, well known for his channel Vlogbrothers that he does with his brother Hank Green. John is also an instrumental figure and co-creator behind the YouTube channel Crash Course. And I must admit that I didn't really watch YouTube that much as an entertainment source until I put my channel up on YouTube not long ago. I mostly watched how-to videos like how to unjam the blades on my chainsaw or how to replace a water shutoff valve. When I discovered Vlogbrothers, it became one of my favorite channels, right up there with SciShow, of which John's brother Hank Green created. My inner nerd could really just embrace and enjoy John and Hank's weekly discussions on Vlogbrothers. So why did I choose Looking for Alaska when there are so many highly esteemed novels out there? Well, last week as I logged into YouTube, a Vlogbrothers video from 3 years ago was plopped right in the first slot of my recommended videos to watch, and so I watched on the banning of Looking for Alaska, where John discussed how the American Library Association announced his book was the most challenged book in 2015 because it had been banned around the country for explicit language and sexually explicit descriptions. Now keep in mind this book was written nearly 15 years ago in 2005, and I always enjoy the videos where John and Hank discuss their experience as writers because I can somewhat relate to that. So later that day after I watched John's video, I was cleaning my room and I found 3 separate drafts of 3 books I had written in the last decade. And I just decided it was time to burn them and forget about them in a dramatic fashion. So after having been tempted to read one of John Green's books, as well as reminded there are other genres out there besides nonfiction, I bought a copy of Looking for Alaska and I headed out into the woods to get some reading done. I set out in the early afternoon on a cold day, finding some salamanders and birds along the way, and found a cozy spot right next to a creek. I tried to set up a time lapse with my GoPro, but the battery decided it was ready for early retirement, and then I messed up setting up the time lapse with my DSLR. So here's only 6 seconds of my time lapse reading. Holy sh**, what an amazing book. I feel the true power of assessing any piece of artwork or literature is by determining how it evokes emotion from those interacting or witnessing it. And this book hit me right in the feels many times. I almost cried at one point, and I have not cried since my mid-20s. So that's saying something. I got hit, with that fire that kind of swells up from your gut and then hits your sinuses with that pressure. This book fully triggered emotions and memories of mine from my teenage years when I was firstly and fully appreciating the fine form of the other sex and the shenanigans I did with my friends at that time. I was so taken with Looking for Alaska that I stayed by that creek and read it front to back as the sun was dropping under the tree line and the temperature kept dropping and I was shivering my ass off. So I have to say that wow at the beginning was definitely a wow of approval and applause. Great work, John. Thank you for letting me read that. That was, I feel like that's a gift. So I'm actually going to put John's link to his website where you can pick up a copy. It's not sponsored, I just think you should read this book. I'll be brief on this week's Nature is Nifty. I will once again mention the attention restoration theory that getting outside modestly activates our involuntary attention as our directed attention mechanisms have a chance to be replenished. And this improves our short-term memory and mood. I left my cell phone at home, I got away from the noisy kids in the house, and I was fully able to unwind and enjoy that book much more than I could have indoors. So I hope you try this activity. And yeah, I'll probably do it again with another one of John's books, and probably with his brother's new book. And I want to remind you that you can still participate in Project Feeder Watch anytime up until early April. You can just observe birds at your feeder, contribute to science, and help out the birds. Link is below. I've had many great species show up during my observations, and I'm curious what migratory birds will stop by before winter gets into full swing. Spread some knowledge, beat nature heroic, and I hope to see you next week.